This was the go-to scene with the flat brim, Kyle, Monster Energy drinking, earlobe stretch, cholo wannabes back in the 2000s. Hey everyone, I'm Broomy and welcome to my new What Killed series. This is where I look at things that have died out in the automotive landscape, discuss them, and try and work out why they're not popular anymore. So today we're going to talk about 3 car scenes that have plenty of content to talk about. That is sex spec, VIP, and lowriders. Now I want to make something clear here first. The point of this video isn't to make fun of the cars or the people involved in those scenes at that time. It's more to understand what made them so popular and why they're just not popular anymore. Alright, so before we start, I just want to mention 2 things quickly. First being my other social media accounts, that is Paul Broomy on Instagram and Paul Broomy FB on Facebook, where you can find out heaps of daily content I'm posting up there every single day. The second being my own performance parts business, mrparts.com.au. Supporting small business like that means I have more time to do more content like this. Finally, don't forget to show support for the channel if you could. Easy just to scroll down and click the subscribe button and click the bell to receive all notifications. And also if you could, copy the link and paste it to Facebook and share it with your mates. And with that out of the way, let's begin. Right, so let's start on the positive and probably the least emotional in the comment section, and that is the VIP scene. Alright, so this scene, as with many other popular scenes in the 2000s, had its origin story in Japan. So VIP cars were traditionally large, rear-wheel drive, very expensive sedans, and in Australia was really popular around the auto salon period in those 2000s era. In Australia we saw a lot of Japanese cars, but also a lot of Euros in the VIP scene. You'd always see cars represented from Lexus and Toyota, but also Audi, Mercedes and BMW. These vehicles were easily identified by their lowered suspension, extremely expensive wheels, body kits and also negative camber. Also, these cars were predominantly black for the most part, hence VIP. In Japan, where the scene originated from, this style of car was very popular amongst the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. Top of the line models such as the Celsior, Aristo, Crown, they were the go-to cars there. The aim of the scene here was to modify an already very expensive car and to spec it out essentially to something that a VIP person would be seen driving around in it. However, if you look at the style of some of these cars, I'm not sure there'd be too many VIP people that would actually be seen dead in one of these things.
Got him!
And aesthetic modifications were all this scene was built on. There was no performance really benefits to any of this. It was all done to take an already expensive car and to make it look even more expensive. So in this scene in the mid-2000s, it was really dominated by, honestly, international students, Asian international students to be more specific. And it's not stereotyping or being racist in any way there. I went to university and I met quite a lot of people in the scene, and yeah, the cars were basically a status symbol to show their family's wealth to other people, to say, hey, look at what I've got and look at how much money I've got, pretty much. So it was, as with many car scenes, it was built around ego. The extreme lowered suspension, the body kits, the negative camber, all these things actually made the car ride significantly worse than it did when it come from factory. So, you know, they weren't doing this for performance upgrades or to make it handle any better. They were really just doing it to say, hey, look at my ride. Now, as with any scene that's built predominantly on ego, it can be easy come, easy go. And that was the case with VIP cars. So when the auto salon really shut its doors and flung off in the late 2000s, a VIP scene followed pretty much not long after. These guys with their big cars, negative camber, lowered, they really didn't have anywhere to show off their cars to the masses anymore, so they just moved on to the next thing. So while this scene might not exist in big volume today, I'd say firmly and squarely that if you look at the stance and stance culture scene, that it owes a lot to the VIP culture. So aggressive styling, negative camber, large expensive wheels, things like that. That's what stances are really built on. You know, throw out the ultra expensive Euro and Japanese cars and that's pretty much stance. So we'll talk about stance in a later video, but yeah, I'd say VIP has really evolved somewhat into what we know as stance today. All right, so that takes us to our next scene, which also has its roots in the auto salon massive ego culture, and that is sex spec.
All right, ladies, we're good. We're good.
Now, unlike the VIP scene where you need that really expensive gangster-looking black rear-wheel drive sedan, anyone could enter the sex spec scene. So no better example of this were the hundreds and hundreds of copycat droid body kit, Bob Jane chrome wheels, absolutely lowered on cut springs, CE Lancers that you used to see at every single Macca's car park on a Friday night. So sex spec cars were easily identified by their 17 or 18 inch chrome wheels, their really outlandish bright colour paint jobs, oversized exhausts, and huge in-car entertainment systems. Right, so this scene was mainly dominated by 4-cylinder JDM Japanese import type cars. Everything from your naturally aspirated base model Mirages and Lancers and whatnot, all the way to your turbocharged WRX and your 200SX were really popular in this scene, you know. If you could put big wheels and big exhaust and stuff on it, you know, you could sex spec your car. So it's pretty easy to spot sex spec cars at car shows. You know, the ones with the 7 TV screens for no particular reason all throughout the car, the Lambo doors that had no place being on it, and the exhaust that you could pretty much fit your head in. And not to mention, of course, the obligatory PlayStation or Xbox for whatever reason.
I didn't give a I'm gonna blow my engine.
Now with most sex spec cars, it seemed that the idea was to modify pretty much everything on the car except the performance of it.
Producing 140 horsepower at the front wheels. The 8-nozzle 600 horsepower nitrous kit is not yet connected.
Now just like VIP cars, sex spec cars were all about aesthetics and ego. You know, make no mistake about it. It was all about bringing the attention to the car and to the owner and pretty much nothing else. Now where VIP cars could hide and play inside essentially, sex spec cars had no chance. Bright paintwork, huge chrome wheels that had no place in these cars. But that was the point. The owners wanted to stand out all the time. They wanted attention non-stop and people to look at the cars at every chance they got.
What happened, Mr. Jupiter?
No, not the beast! Not the beast!
So if you look at a scene chart and look at where the cars might sit, you might have sleepers all the way on one side where performance is all that matters and the aesthetics doesn't really matter. Sex spec would be on total polar opposite side of that. So sex spec was all about look at me, the appearance of the car, and performance was the last thing on their mind. Now one of the key reasons this scene was so popular in the 2000s was its relatively low cost of entry. So you buy a second or third hand CE Mirage Lancer, 18-inch chrome wheels from your local wheel and tyre place, huge exhaust, maybe an ill-fitting droid body kit, and that's it. You're in the scene. You're now a doyen of the sex spec car community. Now I personally sit on the opposite end of this scene. I've never owned a set of chrome wheels and I've never had a car with a really, really bright outlandish paint job. And sleepers are my kind of thing. I really don't build a car so people are look at me sort of thing. I'm all about performance and I love drag racing or circuit racing. So going out cruising on a Friday night and hanging out the Macca's car park isn't my thing. However, I can see why this scene was really popular. I mean, low cost to entry. You got VIPs are through the roof. Performance cars really expensive and probably not able to drive them on their provisional licenses. But sex spec, low cost to entry. Their cars were normally non-performance based, so they were pretty much reliable. And yeah, you'd be king of the kids down at the local scene on the Friday night at the local Macca's. What's not to love? Now, just like the VIP scene, with the sex spec scene being built completely on ego, well, when the appetite of the general public has sort of dried up of, you know, that sex spec car and they've moved on to the next thing, that scene's going to die a pretty quick death as well. So with Auto Salon packing up and new cars coming and new performances coming out, sex spec scene wrapped up pretty quickly in the probably around that late 2000s, maybe 2010s sort of era, and yeah, died a pretty quick death because people had just got bored of it. Now, in my opinion, while looking at the VIP cars, they look pretty good. I don't think there's anything that anyone misses from the sex spec era of cars that we don't look back fondly and say, geez, I wish those were still around. And moving on to the third and final scene, we have the mini truck or the lowrider scene. So this was the go-to scene with the flat brim, Kyle, Monster Energy drinking, earlobe stretch, cholo wannabes back in the 2000s.
Right now, I can't really see anything because these aren't my glasses.
Now, as with the last two scenes, this scene again was built on aesthetics and ego because they were built around cars that were pretty much the slowest on the road. You've got tradesmen's or contractors' utes slammed down to the ground, throwing out sparks, and that was pretty much it for the scene. So this scene really is responsible for the launch of airbag suspension into the mainstream. Also, it had a lot of throwbacks to early hot rodding, so notching frames, drop spindles, and airbrushing all were pretty popular in this scene. Now C10 and S10 Chevys, F-Series Ford trucks, as well as modern day trucks like the Hilux were pretty prevalent in this scene. So whereas the P-plate Hoon tradie these days might drive a VE Commodore SV6, back in the 2010 sort of era, they were definitely driving a mini truck. So it was almost a mash of multiple cultures in this scene. We had the owners taking styling of their car tips from the Mexican and the LA gangster rap lowrider scene. However, the people that owned them looked more like Eminem and be more at home playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So the really expensive cars in this scene had notch frame rails, airbags, airbrushing, and the cars actually looked really, really good. And you probably see some of those cars still around now at car shows. Now the budget version of these were really rough and ready. They had just cut out inner guards, chopped springs, and they were just slammed to the ground, and they were terrible. Right, so what killed mini trucking and lowrider scene? I think automotive road laws had a lot to do with it, as well as easier access to finance and aging of the core group in this scene. As these cars were obviously extremely low, they were easy pickings for the police. So, you know, eventually you get one defect, you get two, you get three or whatever. It gets pretty tiresome after a while. So a lot of the people that had these cars in this scene just would have got sick of it. And there's only so many times you can get pulled over for illegal modifications to your suspension by the police with your mates before the luster of impressing everyone down at the local Macca's on a Friday night really starts to wear off. So secondly, finance become a hell of a lot easier access for people in this scene. So what you would see now, instead of having to buy a cheap second-hand tradies car, you could all of a sudden buy a Falcon or a Commodore Ute that had modern ABS, comfortable seats, 3 times the amount of power, and probably looked a fair bit better too. So I think that had a lot to do with this scene dying out. And with the Ute moving on, you're only left with a tiny niche of the true lovers of this car scene. So I'm not saying this scene is totally dead and buried, and I'm sure there's a small amount of mini trucks still out there. It is nowhere near as popular as it was back 10 years ago, and that's why we're talking about them now. Okay, so that should just about do us today for our first episode on the What Killed series. So if you or you know someone that owned one of these cars that we've discussed today, hit us up in the comments below about what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, and if you missed the scene, do you wish it still was around? Do you want to see a resurgence of any of these scenes, and do you think what I said today I got it right? So there'll be heaps of other kind of videos on this channel moving forward. There won't just be What Killed series, but for future What Killed series, why don't you nominate something what you'd like to see me discuss? Hit me up in the comments below. So if you liked the video, please think about giving it a thumbs up, share it on social media, and don't forget to subscribe. Now, while this channel has actually been around for 13 years, we've only just started posting content properly on it in the last month. So that means we're an ultra new channel. You're not going to hear about it unless you subscribe. So don't forget, click the subscribe button and then ring the bell to hit all notifications. And with that, I say thanks for watching, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time, either here or even on the Full Boost YouTube channel. Till then, catch you next time.